So the United Church of Canada is the result of a merger in 1925 between three denominations, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and the Congregationalists in Canada, and local independent union churches. So the church always had the idea that this would not be the end, that there would be further mergers until there was a gigantic national Protestant church in Canada covering the entire country. The Evangelical United Brethren joined in 1967, and then since then the vision of how to be the church, I think, has really shifted from organic unity, that is mergers and amalgamations with other denominations, to looking at how we can be in partnership while still maintaining independence as separate denominations. That it's, in our vision, it's no longer necessary to abandon your denominational identity and to enter into a full-scale merger. When we spoke to the United Church of Christ several years ago, we were originally going to talk about mutual recognition of ministers, so that ministers moving in and out of both denominations would be recognized and be able to move at the minimum of us. But they said we really only look at these things through the lens of a full communion agreement. So we negotiated a full communion agreement with them, and then and that immediately suggested that the disciples would be a possible partner. We had a disciples observer at our initial talks with the United Church of Christ from the Canadian disciples. And then we found that there was interest after the conclusion of the United Church of Christ talks from the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada, and that had already been suggested because of the sharing of a global ministries structure between the two denominations, and in fact it had been remarked on in our final report on that full communion agreement. So those talks, the staff initially met. We got talks underway by striking committee. There were 6 people from each denomination who were meant to be comparable. So there was a regional minister from the Disciples, the regional minister for Canada. There was a regional minister from the United Church of Canada. Well, at that time it was a conference executive secretary. We've since moved to a regional structure. There was a theologian. Interestingly, he was on the United Church team for the United Church of Christ talks, because he's a disciples minister leading a United Church theological school. Then he was on the disciples team for the disciples talks, and so on. There is a minister in congregational ministry from both denominations, and those talks went pretty smoothly. There were details to flesh out. There were areas of difference to explore. For instance, the disciples practice adult baptism. The United Church of Canada tends to have infant baptism as the norm. But this difference in sacraments was not felt to be an obstacle to recognition of each other's baptisms. Differences in communion, sacramental theology were not felt to be a detriment to having an open table between the two denominations, which is one of the marks of full communion. The training of ministers was comparable, so that mutual recognition of ministers would be mainly a matter of ensuring educational requirements were matched, and and a minister entering the other denomination would be familiar with the history and practices of the polity. And so we met once at a retreat center near Guelph, Ontario, once in Toronto, and a number of times electronically. And that was all we needed to write the final report, which went to the General Council of the United Church of Canada, meeting in Oshawa, Ontario in July 2018, where it was passed, and to the General Assembly of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada, where it was passed today, July 22nd, 2019. So then there will be next steps to come with how we celebrate and mark the full communion agreement. And then, of course, all of these things are only on paper if they are not realized in practice. So what are ideas for congregations to support and cooperate with each other when there is disciples and a United Church congregation or congregations in close proximity? How can the national structures of the church work together? We're already getting some practice in that with arrangements for the assembly and meeting together. And of course, our ecumenical officers know each other well from work over the years. So that will be an exciting time. There will be many things to learn from each other. And of course, the big difference between the disciples' full communion agreement from the perspective of the United Church of Canada and the previous one with the United Church of Christ is that the disciples have a presence in Canada. There are only a couple of United Church of Christ congregations in Canada. And that means that there will be a Canadian region of the disciples to interface with directly, but also sensitivities on the part of many Canadian disciples that whereas the United Church of Canada is not as large as the disciples overall, we are much larger in Canada than the disciples' presence in the country. So being sensitive to concerns that they not be overshadowed, that their contributions are valued. This is not a merger where these congregations are going to be consumed by United Church regions. We are going to exist alongside each other. We already have a model of long-standing with the two shared ministries that we have in Winnipeg and Calgary to show us the way forward to cooperation and support between the two denominations in Canada. And internationally, there will be more possibilities to explore with global ministries and our mission and service and international ecumenical and interfaith activities. So we are very much looking forward to this exciting time.